Years ago, now I'm dating myself, but before your phone allowed you to carry thousands of pictures in your pocket, some people would leave their house with a plastic wallet that unfolded like a waterfall into several compartments, and each one would house a photograph. And each of these photographs meant something to the individual. They were markers. They might have marked a relationship, a moment in time, a memory they wanted to share, a story they wanted to enhance with imagery. Somebody that used to be in their life is no longer there. And in many ways, Chatter That Matters is an audio version of the plastic wallet. I interview guests to learn about their journey, the choices they make, the moments that matter. But instead of pictures, we rely on conversations and my guests' ability to animate their life, their trauma, their triumphs, their challenges, their choices, the unexpected and expected. And the lessons they have learned, I hope can help the rest of us get to where we need, want, and deserve to go. My guest today is no exception. He didn't have the greatest childhood. He made a career defining decisions after years invested in studying psychology with aspirations possibly to become a lawyer. He's had to fill some of the biggest shoes in his industry, but he found a way to realize enormous career success, only at times to find himself not happy. And I think that's a theme that we've seen time and time again, that sometimes what we chase when we get there and look around, we go, is this really where I want to be?
I had gotten fired 3 times. I also started to think, maybe I'm not any good. You know, my advice for anyone breaking into the industry is, if you get canned, it could be the best thing that ever happens to you. It kind of made me appreciate being in the business. Don't take anything for granted. You also get a little bit of a chip on your shoulder. You try harder because you don't want to get canned again.
And today, at the pinnacle of his career, he's also lit a fuse that's counting down to his retirement. His name's Aaron Starkman. He's much too young to retire. And I hope he offers you some powerful insights into his life and ideally ours, and that the time we spend together is time well spent.
This is Chatter That Matters with Tony Chapman, presented by RBC.
Aaron Starkman, welcome to Chatter That Matters.
Well, thanks for having me, Tony.
Listen, I'm a huge fan of everything that you do and that your agency puts out, and there's really no exaggeration in saying that this Made in Canada shop is among the best, if not the best in the world. Just explain to my listeners that in terms of the advertising world, what it means to be recognized in that company, and more often than not, be at the top of that company.
We are all singing from the same song sheet. I think that's how we're doing it, and thank you for the compliment, Tony. Whether you're in the discipline of account services or accounting, even in design, we are all following the same playbook, and that's everything. It really is. So every person in the company is clear on goals, and every single person is clear on how to get there. When you're clear about your ambitions and everyone understands that the goal is effectiveness on your clients' brands, but the strategy to get there is bold creativity. When everybody gets that as a strategy for your client and for your own agency success, it yields to good results. And we're finding that the last few years.
But we're not talking about manufacturing automobiles on an assembly line or even inventing the next chip. We're talking about something very intangible, which is advertising. It's baked in insights, ideas. A lot of salesmanship has to go in it because you have to find courageous clients with the courage to try different things. So it's great to talk about the goals and objectives and have this rigorous discipline, but there must be some secret sauce to Rethink that says that we find a way to attract, your theme, attract people that are capable of creating work the world talks about.
There is a method to the madness. A lot of people think when they think about creatives, advertising people, they think of, wacky people with crazy hair running around and being disorganized. With Rethink, in fact, it's quite the opposite. We are very process driven. We have all these little rethinkisms that were created a long time ago. Things like CRAFTS, which is an acronym, which is maybe I can get into later. Go Then Grow. We have a relationship accelerator, where clients come in before we even really start working with them, and we talk open and honestly about pet peeves, maybe ways they were burned by a previous agency or a previous partner, and we just say the thing. At Rethink, we say the thing. We're even having say the thing training, and it sets the right conditions. When you follow all of this, it just yields a lot of success, and also the agency leaders don't have to be in the weeds on every little single thing. They can leave it to many people because there's a playbook or an owner's manual. You just got to follow the playbook, and it makes life really easy.
How do you find people with contrarian minds? Because I would argue a young Aaron Starkman would have been very rebellious to walk into an organization like Rethink and be handed an owner's manual and process when you wanted to come in there and say, one of the things that attracted to me this industry is the freedom to be free.
When I was younger, I'd say 2 years in the business, I knew in my guts what a good idea was. And I knew how to get to it mostly. Sometimes I would go astray and I'd present something to my creative director that kind of sucked. What the owner's manual does, in the case of, let's say, crafts, an acronym, it gives a young person and the person they're presenting to a clear indicator what is good creativity. Now, what I intuitively knew as a young creative is now in writing. This is what makes a good idea. Crafts. So this is what I knew intuitively, but now it's written with a checklist. And as a young creative, I check it off. C, is it clear? R, is your idea relevant? A, is it achievable? Is it going to shut down the brewery or cause their legal department to freak out? Fresh. If it's done, it's dead. True. Are you telling the truth about the product or about the situation? And S, is it shareable? The top creatives in the world follow crafts intuitively without knowing they're following it. We're giving this to the junior art directors out there and planners too, by the way. We give this to all our planners. Our planners follow crafts. It makes life easy. It really does.
You know, you have your hand on the rudder of this creative agency called Rethink, but I want to rewind the clock because there's some interesting things in our pre-interview that really continue to have this hypothesis without any empirical data. But sometimes trauma leads to triumph. Sometimes a tough childhood that you overcome gives you permission to go further than anybody ever expected. And yours and mine childhood was very similar in the sense that we had a dad who was an alcoholic. So talk to me about a young Aaron in that household, and what did you do to cope? What did you do to escape? And what did you learn that you still have with you today?
So not a lot of people know this or know about my dad, just very close friends, a few rethinkers. My partners know it. But they also know that my childhood makes me me. There's two kinds of people in this world. There's people who had a good childhood, and there are those that are funny. I'm in the latter camp. Now, when I was younger, listen, my dad was an alcoholic, and I certainly not going to get into all of it. He was kind of like a happy drunk, so there's that. I remember just a lot of yelling, and I think that was stressful for me as a child. A lot of my mom yelling at my dad, things like that. And it's just, the volume of it. You need to just figure out a way to shut it down or deal with it. And my way, Tony, was creativity. I didn't know I had it. I didn't know I was creative. But in the times when the house got a little loud, I calmed myself down. I drew. I wrote little stories. I made little comic books. And the noise, it's just like a baseball player is just in the zone, gets up to the plate, and just like the crowd noise and the booing, it's like, "You suck, Aaron Judge." All that noise kind of goes away, and you're locked in. And I was locked in on these little creative things, comic books, drawings, funny stories, from a very young age, that has stuck with me. That is why I'm very calm under pressure. If we're facing a crisis, whether it's a loss of business or COVID or there's a pitch or we got to crack something, my creativity takes over. The noise goes out, and the darker things are, Tony, the more creative and focused I become. And that's always been with me.
The other side that I found quite intriguing, because somebody that will lock themselves into comic books and drawing and stories, you're at camp, you're called Gordy from Stand By Me because of your storytelling. So you might go inside at times, but it sounded like you also, the veneer that you put out, you were happy to bring a drawbridge down and go out and meet people versus maybe bring in what was inside you.
I think I'm one of those people that's kind of like quiet and shy to some people, but a boisterous, loud, excitable voice to others. And I'd find it, like a performer on stage, I could find it. When I present to clients scripts or in a pitch or wherever, I'm the best version of myself. It's like the spotlight's on and I love it. Like a stand-up comic, I love it. At camp, yeah, I did make up stories. People asked me to tell another story, Gordy. My middle name happened to be Gordon, and not everyone knew that, but there was that commonality with the Stand By Me character who told very great stories, like the pie eating contest. But I would always do that, and I, from a young age, I remember I was like 13, 14, I was feeding off the energy, the reactions of the crowd. I was basically trying stuff out, seeing what hit. And it's a rush. It's a rush when, you got something that people laugh at. And also it's a test. It's a test of your own creativity. Can you just make stuff up on the fly? Can you just roll with it and make stuff up and keep the story going, like improv it? And often I did, and I didn't realize that was different than other kids until they kept bugging me to tell them stories. Tell another story, Gordy.
It's interesting. I'm a big fan of a certain type of comedy, which I call very insight driven. Seinfeld, a show about nothing, but it was about everything. Bill Cosby, before he went sideways with his, talking about family, Richard Pryor talking about life in the project. And I have to believe that inside every great creative person is an ability to have an insight where everybody else just looks at it and takes it for granted. Do you find that about yourself?
Yeah, I do. Whether, I'm out for a beer with, a few buddies, at work with my kids, insightful things land. It's like, oh, I never thought of that before. That's why Seinfeld and Curb Your Enthusiasm, it's like, oh, it is right there. And no one's really talked about that before. In a way, Curb Your Enthusiasm and Seinfeld, very, very crafts. It's always clear, relevant, fresh, and shareable. And you're seeing the clips go viral now. So having great insights, it's part of me. And I didn't just develop those, or it doesn't come maybe totally naturally to me. When I was a kid, other than, a few camp people who wanted to hear stories, I didn't have a lot of friends. So I was at home watching a lot of TV, a lot of movies, a lot of funny things. And I would see insightful jokes. They'd resonate with me. And I have so much of that in my brain that now there's no room for people's birthdays and there's face blindness because I have so much stuff in my head. I remember the exact angle when something was funny in Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. I remember John Candy's chest went on fire and the angle in which they both looked back. I remember that. I remember that exact angle. I haven't seen that in 15 years. I remember that angle, and I remember things that don't work. I remember there was a movie, again, we're talking when I was a kid. I still remember this weirdly. There was a woman giving birth, but they only had the camera on her face. And as a kid, I was like, no. Why are they only showing her face? This is not childbirth. There's going to be some lame joke coming. And then sure enough, they went to a wide shot and she was like opening up a jar of pickles or something, So I found the hits and the misses very interesting. I still do. And it informs what I do and how I do it.
I want to move the story to Zig.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of people that won't know the significance of it, but it was an extraordinary agency. It's still being recognized, the ad of the century and such. And you were a creative person there, but then you moved into creative leadership. And you were very honest in telling me that you really sucked in your early days. And I can understand why in some ways. I mean, you're a lead singer without a band. I mean, you're doing comic books and you're entertaining your friends. You're not in an ensemble cast and you're presenting ideas to a creative director. And next thing you know, they give you the game ball and say, we actually want you to start leading. Share with the audience how big that transition is. I mean, you can easily get a title, but to move from being responsible for one to responsible for many. What was it like, and why do you feel you were so horrible at it at the beginning?
I didn't quite get the memo of what you're supposed to do and what changes. I thought I was prepared, and it turns out I was grossly not. I was a good creative. That's my fastball, coming up with ideas. And then in this industry, it's so strange. You're good at one thing, coming up with ideas, writing headlines, and then you get promoted to something totally different. I thought creative directing was just like, oh, team's presenting to me, their idea stinks. I have a better idea. So I didn't bond with my my coworkers. I was a really young guy taking over. What I missed was, and what I found out learning from Chris Staples, the key to it all is really what Elspeth, Andy, and Lorraine did at Zig. The key to it, and I missed it, is set the conditions for success. I did not do that. I didn't know that. You need to spend, instead of just focusing on how to make the idea in front of you better, the focus should be, how do I set the conditions for success? What do I do to make everybody firing on all cylinders, singing from the same song sheet? How do I make them better, fast, and often? And I didn't really figure that out until, 7 years ago. 7 years ago at Rethink, a little bit before COVID.
Great insights for people. Set the conditions for success, because when you've got a fastball and people are, coming after you and you can strike this out, it's tough, because ultimately the business and the economics of the business depends on delivering something to the client that they're going to buy and get excited about. It is a great lesson in life. So you talk about moving to Rethink, and let's talk about Chris and you, and because again, he was certainly another force in this industry, as the ones you mentioned before, Elspeth and Andy at Zig. What did you see from him that was different, that also gave you context that said, maybe I got to learn a curve and a change up?
Chris and I couldn't be any more different. So I describe him as an A++ creative director. And he'll tell you this. He was a B- writer or B- creative, but unbelievable creative director. And I'm the opposite. I'm a good creative. The creative director thing was not coming to me naturally at all. When he founded Rethink with his partners, Ian and Tom, he had all these things. The acronym, that's not my acronym. I've been religious about it, and I've been making everybody do it and been teaching it. But he has set up a way to have this, we call it the Rethink machine, just run smoothly. And then in terms of just all the process, he's so organized. And I learned that in my first few years at Rethink. I co-CD'd everything with Chris. We would work on Molson together. I'd watch him do his thing, and it was like very crystal clear. I want 7 ideas that do the X, Y, and Z, and I want 5 ideas that do, another bunch of letters. And he'd be very clear and concise that way, where my fastball was, why don't you just have the lion eat the guy by the car? So I'm coming up with ideas, and I still do. But the thing I learned from Chris is organization, rigor, and truly setting the conditions. I've come up with my own. I've taken some from my last agency, and it is really buttoned down. And the difference between me at Zig as a creative leader and me at Rethink as a creative leader is we have a well-oiled machine.
In context for the people listening that aren't familiar with the advertising world, very often these independent shops grow up, and then their only way out is they sell to a multinational who gives the owners a lot of money. And then over time, not always, but over time, I would say the soul is removed. Toll booth replaces it, and it falls apart. But your Rethink didn't do that. Rethink decided that they could turn the game ball over to the next generation, which they've done. And under your watch, you've grown it dramatically. I'm curious what the dynamics like between the old guard and the new guard. I mean, they must have an immense sense of pride that they figured this mousetrap out as well and kept this agency, this machine, moving even faster, better, and more efficiently than what they created. There must be a lot of pride with them.
I think so. And the founders of Rethink wrote a book called Rethinking the Business of Creativity. I think, and we've talked about this, we've joked. I think the next book, Tom Shapansky, that I think he's going to write it. We've joked about it, but I think it may be an actual thing to talk about succession and doing it a different way, and not having to sell to have a fulfilling life, both financially and spiritually. And
do you ever hear from Chris and he send you a note and say, that creative thing, but you should have had the lion eating the guy in front of the car? Or does he just stay out of your kitchen?
No, I'm the one that talks about the lion eating the guy in front of the car. Chris will say, I noticed the culture check scores dipped from 4.26 to 4.1. Why do you think that? I noticed it's in are you happy at Rethink, or another question? And he goes to the data. So we're very different that way.
When we return, Aaron and I delve deeper into his mental health journey. Then we talk about other emotions, both the fear and excitement for the future Rethink. And of course, my 3 takeaways. Hi, it's Tony Chapman from Chatter That Matters. The world's upside down, and having peace of mind seems to be the exception versus the rule. RBC Wealth Management is hoping to change that. They don't have a crystal ball, but they do have a team of experts dedicated to working with you to preserve and grow your wealth and help you manage risk so that you can enjoy the rewards of your labor. Your peace of mind and financial health matters to RBC.
You got to be a sponge. You got to ask questions, be hungry. You can't teach fire. You can't teach fire. So I look for that. And that's actually more important than a great book is just crazy fire. Want it.
You're listening to Chatter That Matters with Tony Chapman, presented by RBC.
Today in Chatter That Matters, I'm joined by one of the world's top 100 creative people. His name's Aaron Starkman. He's also the Chief Creative Officer behind Rethink. And both, I'm proud to say, are Canadian. Let's talk about you as an individual, and we'll wrap it up back with Rethink. But, you're very open with when we were talking prior to this about your mental health struggles. When your mom passed, you had a dream, which I want to hear about. But I also want to hear about the fact that with all your success, Gord wasn't as happy as he should have been. So let's start first talking about, you've gotten to a place that very few people in the world in advertising have reached. And yet you looked around and said, am I really happy there? Let's start with that. And then we'll talk about your mom and the dream.
So anxiety is a real thing for me. And people that know me from Zig will probably say, Aaron is a real introvert. It's the furthest thing from the truth. I'm really an extrovert, but I suffer from anxiety. We've done, had group sessions where, we're with everybody in the agency. It's like, take a step to the left if you're like this, or a step to the right if you're like this. And then you end up seeing, well, who's an introvert and who's an extrovert. And I'm like way at the end on the right. So I'm clearly an extrovert, but why is it I shut down and sometimes come off aloof to some people? It's because I'm in my own head, or I was, not anymore. Just stressing about stupid things. And that's anxiety. And I, for the longest time, wanted to do something about it, but never really did. A little bit of research told me taking some sort of anti-anxiety medication can mess with your creative process. It could actually make you a worse creative. And I didn't want to mess around with that. Then finally, after my mom died a few years ago, like the night after her funeral, I had the most vivid dream. I woke up in a cold sweat, and it felt so real. And it was just my mom talking to me saying, listen, you've gone through many, many years, 45 years of your life living like this. It's no way to live, honey. It's no way to go through life. I don't care how successful you are. You got to be happy. Your kids got to see you being happy. Stop being tortured. And I was tortured. So I aggressively pursued cognitive therapy. I'm like, I'm just going to deal with this. Like it felt like more than a dream to me. I started taking medication. It's one of the common ones. And, slowly but surely, like over the course of, 4 to 6 weeks, I'm like, wait, is this how it was supposed to be? And, with the combination of cognitive therapy, all the stuff that was in my head, that was occupying space, the worry, just the anxiety, it all went away. And it actually helped me be way better at what I do. This isn't an ADHD medicine. It's an anti-anxiety medicine. But what it's doing is it gets rid of the crap so you can just focus. Focus on setting the conditions. Focus on the things that matter. Focus on the client conversations. Focus on the presentation. Focus on the edit. Focus on all of it. And it's been a game changer. I'm talking about it, and thank you for asking, because I don't want people who are struggling with it, who are on the fence. Do I do something about it? Do I try therapy or whatever? I think do something about it. I really do. It's really changed my life. And I'm so excited about the second part of my life now, because the first part was successful, but not so happy.
It's interesting. And I'm not sure I've ever shared this, but my mom, the day after she died, came to me in a dream that was so vivid, unlike any dream I've ever had in my past. And she's eating a tuna fish sandwich, and she hated fish because she had to go to a convent when she was young, and Friday was fish night. And during the Depression, you can only imagine there's probably a fish shed or something. And I said, "You're eating tuna fish?" And she goes, "Yes, up here, everything's beautiful." And it was like her way of telling me I'm okay now after living with my dad for so many years and taking on so much stress. And it's interesting that, you wonder if there really is something to that, their ability to just care so much that they find one last moment in time.
Yeah.
I want to bring this back to you because you're talking about the second half of your life and you're so excited about it, but you're also talking about retirement. To me, like the thing I fear the most in life is retirement. I plan to, on my deathbed, to have a microphone in front of me. I can't imagine not doing what I'm doing. So why would you even consider retirement with where you've taken this agency and where you're going to take it in the next 5 years?
My plan is to take it to a special place, an even more special place. And I need to do that to be able to retire financially. I need to. I don't necessarily want to retire. I do love the idea of nothingness. I've learned this from Chris. He's impacted me as not just a mentor, but as a man. Chris says, turn off your phone when you're on vacation, put it in the safe. I learned that. I've learned that from him. And, you work hard, you embrace the nothingness. I do. I'm not one to I don't want to walk around on the beaches of Negril like stressed out on a work call. I want to leave that with my partners and have trust. It's like that later in life. I'm 49 now. In 6 years, you know what I want? I want that. And then if I get bored, I'll do something else. But I want that. And to get that, I have a goal in mind for the agency. It's to get to a certain point and to be creatively better than we've ever been. I'm setting this is a BHAG, retire at 55. That seems unrealistic. We're not selling the company. I'm not going to get a big paycheck from Omnicom or whatever. So with that in mind, what do we have to do to get me to retire at 55? What do I have to do? It's really just following what we've done before. We've totally nailed our BHAG in the past, and I'll just relate it to a work thing for a second. And this is why I do think it's possible. We've had success at it. Right before COVID, we said we want to do something that has never been done before. We want to win in Canada. We want to win Agency of the Year. We want to win Digital Agency of the Year. We want to win Design Agency of the Year. That trifecta has never been done. We wrote it down. We set the conditions in the process to make that happen. At the time, we were the 5th best agency in Canada. Leo Burnett was number 1. Maybe Cossette was right there with them. We went out and we did it. A year and a half later, we won all 3. And every year since then, we've won Agency of the Year in Canada every year because we're just going after the BHAG. And then to where we started this podcast, Tony, it's all coming back to this question about retirement and goals. Where we started this podcast, you asked about like the recent success of Rethink internationally. It's not just a Canada thing anymore. We were just awarded Independent Agency of the Year at the last 3 big shows in the world. The Andes, the One Show, and the Clios, where Don Draper collected awards. Our new BHAG is to become International Independent Agency of the Year, and we're doing it because we set new conditions. So because we've had a taste of nailing our goals, following process, I'm hoping that I can do that with my own life. So I set the BHAG of retiring when I'm 55, which means, we have to do even better than what we've done. And while at the same time, just having fun as a company.
Talk to me about Canada. I know that you're international now, but you talk about setting the conditions for success. What do we need to do as a country to set the conditions for success?
I'd like to pressure test crafts as a country. For organizations and leadership across this nation, to our leaders in government, in business, and thought leaders, the C, be clear. Be very clear about what you're doing and where you're going, where you want to head. Be relevant. Is what you're doing relevant to the people in your company, the people who vote, the people who pay taxes? Is it going to be relevant in their lives? Is it going to be achievable? Can we do this? You can't just say, let's make marmalade out of ice cubes. It has to be achievable. Is it fresh? So to government and business leaders, new ideas are good. Out of the box, something that hasn't been done before. That is the way forward. Be true. Don't lie to people. Give them the straight goods. People under you, people voting for you, every Canadian, just level with them. And then shareable. You know what? You want your ideas to spread and take hold in a good way. And ideally, other countries rip us off. They're looking at what we're doing here, and let's share that. Let's share that with the rest of the world.
I'm going to give you the first standing ovation I've ever given on Chat That Matters. I think that is brilliant, and I'm going to just share that clip alone. I always wrap up with my 3 takeaways, and this interview went completely different than we thought it was originally, but I think it's exceptional. First one is the lesson in life for all of us is set the conditions for success. have a big dream, have ambition, look at that highest rung you can possibly look at, but set the conditions so you can get on that first rung and keep climbing. And the fact that this great creative agency continues to come back to words like conditions and process, I think is one of the most remarkable lessons I've learned. The second is, it is right there. The ability to have people leave their screens, leave what they think is status quo, and look around with curiosity and intent and passion and humility and find out what's right there. I think is such a powerful lesson in life, because that right there can take you anywhere. And then I guess the final one is what you did through the dream from your mom, through your therapy, through the medicine you're taking. You got out of your own head. And I think so often, I just interviewed Nick Taylor last night, and he said, I only could become a better golfer when I took all of this stuff out of my head that was hurting me, the intensity, the need to succeed. Every shot had to be a perfect shot, and all the anxiety that comes with being an elite athlete, or in your case, an elite one in advertising, and to remove that and to take out that noise and to be able to focus on what really matters. Those, my friend, are three very powerful lessons in life, and I'm so appreciative that you spent the time with me on Chatter That Matters.
Thank you for taking the time to chat with me. This was this was funny enough. It was therapeutic. I really like talking about this and being honest and just saying the thing. I'm going to try to be this transparent more often. Thanks for getting it out of me, Tony.
Chatter That Matters has been a presentation of RBC.
It's Tony Chapman. Thanks for listening. Let's chat soon.